I stood there in the doorway of that opulent private dining room at Blanc, my heels clicking against the marble floor with a confidence that made the crystal chandeliers seem to shiver. Every face around that mahogany table froze. My father's wine glass stopped midair, suspended between the table and his lips. My mother dropped her napkin. Diana choked on her champagne, red-faced and sputtering. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping backward with a violence that echoed through the stunned silence. But the most satisfying reaction came from Richard Kingston Sr., whose weathered face broke into a knowing smile as he rose from his seat. "Madam President," he said, his voice carrying the weight of respect that my own family had never shown me. "I'm delighted you could join us. I wasn't aware you had connections to the Mitchell family." My father's face turned the color of spoiled meat. "Madame President." "Alexandra, what nonsense are you spouting?" "Richard, don't let this girl deceive you." I smiled the kind of smile that had closed billion-dollar deals and demolished competitors. Two security guards in immaculate black suits flanked the doorway behind me. I walked to the head of the table to my father's seat and placed a leather portfolio, embossed with the AM Holdings logo, directly in front of him. "Father, let me clarify the situation for you. This is the official documentation for the complete acquisition of Kingston Enterprises. Richard, if you would be so kind as to sign here." Richard Kingston Sr. took the pen I offered him, his eyes meeting mine with something close to admiration, and signed without hesitation. The scratch of pen on paper sounded like a death knell in that silent room. Marcus's voice came out strangled. "Acquisition. You can't. You don't have that kind of money. You threw everything away." I let the words hang in the air before responding, each syllable precise as a scalpel cut. "Oh, but I do, Marcus." Kingston Enterprises became a subsidiary of AM Holdings months ago, through a series of complex transactions that our family's antiquated firm couldn't possibly track. Today is merely a formality. I turned to face my father, directly letting him see the cold determination in my eyes. "You taught me that timing is everything in business, Father. You're about to learn the most important lesson from me." Before anyone could respond, I signaled to the sommelier, who appeared with a bottle of Dom Perignon that cost more than my sister's monthly shopping budget. "A toast," I announced, raising my glass. "To new beginnings. And to my family, who are about to witness a new era." But that moment, that glorious moment of revelation, didn't come out of nowhere. And if you're watching this, if you've ever felt dismissed, underestimated, or cast aside by the people who should have valued you most, then you need to hear this whole story. Because what happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who thought they could write me off. So if you want to know how I went from being the family disgrace to the architect of their salvation, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever had to prove someone wrong. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. Now let me take you back. Let me show you how this all started, because the truth is always more complicated than the victory. 5 years earlier, I had walked into that same restaurant with my family for what I thought would be a celebration. I was 23, fresh from completing my dual master's degrees in computer science and business analytics from Stanford, and I had something I was burning to share. My portfolio was tucked under my arm, filled with projections, market analyses, and a revolutionary AI-driven investment platform that I'd been developing for 2 years. I'd worked 18-hour days, survived on coffee and ambition, and created something that I knew could transform Mitchell Investment Group from a respectable mid-tier firm into a technological powerhouse. The restaurant glittered with old money and older traditions. Gas lamps flickered in brass fixtures despite the presence of modern lighting. The walls were paneled in dark wood that had witnessed decades of power deals and family dynasties, making decisions that rippled through generations. I felt both intimidated and excited as the maitre d' led us to our usual table, the one in the corner that my father insisted upon because it allowed him to see everyone coming and going. My father, William Mitchell, sat at the head of the table as always, his silver hair perfectly combed, his Armani suit pressed to military precision. He had built Mitchell Investment Group from a small portfolio management firm into a multi-million-dollar enterprise over 30 years. But he'd done it using methods that were becoming increasingly obsolete, refusing to adapt to the digital age because, as he often said, old money doesn't trust new tricks. My mother, Eleanor, perched beside him like an expensive ornament, her Chanel suit coordinating perfectly with her highlights. She'd given up her own career as an art curator when she married my father, and over the years she'd transformed into someone whose primary concern was maintaining appearances and social standing. Her love had always been conditional, measured in achievements that fit the family narrative. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, sat across from me, already loosening his tie and checking his phone. He'd been groomed to take over the company since birth, despite showing more interest in golf and his trust fund than in actual business strategy. He had our father's seat waiting for him, his future secured not by merit but by birth order and gender. Diana, my younger sister by 2 years, was texting under the table, her carefully cultivated Instagram perfect appearance hiding the fact that she'd failed out of 2 colleges and was currently finding herself on the family Dime. She'd never had to prove anything because she was daddy's little princess, the baby who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Alexandra, the middle child who'd always been a little too smart, a little too ambitious, a little too different. I'd been the one taking advanced math classes while Diana was getting tutored in the basics. I'd been the one staying up late reading about emerging technologies while Marcus was out partying. I'd been the one who actually cared about the future of our family business, who saw the writing on the wall, who understood that we were dinosaurs waiting for the meteor. Alexandra, my father said, as the waiter poured our wine, "Your mother tells me you've been working on some sort of project." This was my moment. I pulled out my portfolio, my hands steady despite my racing heart. "Father, I've developed something that could revolutionize our entire approach to investment management. It's an AI-powered platform that uses machine learning algorithms to predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. I've been testing it for 2 years and the results are extraordinary. We could increase our returns by 40% while reducing risk exposure by half." I opened the portfolio, showing him the graphs, the data, the proof. I'd spent months making sure every number was perfect, every projection was conservative, every risk was accounted for. This wasn't a pipe dream. This was the future, and I was handing it to him on a silver platter. My father didn't even look at the pages. "Alexandra, sweetheart, this is a family dinner, not a board meeting. Can't you just enjoy the meal?" "But father, this is important. If we don't adapt, we're going to be left behind. Kingston Enterprises is already moving into algorithmic trading. The Ashford Group is investing heavily in fintech startups. We're falling behind because we're stuck in the past." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Stuck in the past. Dad's methods have worked for 30 years. What makes you think some computer program knows better than human experience? Because the data doesn't lie, Marcus. Human intuition has limitations. We make decisions based on emotions, on outdated patterns, on personal biases. A properly designed AI system can process millions of data points in seconds and identify opportunities that we'd never see." Diana looked up from her phone for the first time. "You sound like a robot, Alex. Why can't you just be normal?" My mother reached over and patted my hand, her diamond bracelet cold against my skin. "Darling, you've always been so intense about these things. Why don't you leave the business to your father and Marcus? You could do something more suitable. Perhaps event planning or interior design. You have such a good eye for aesthetics." The words hit me like a slap. "More suitable? Mother, I have 2 master's degrees. I've built something revolutionary. This isn't about being suitable, this is about survival. The investment landscape is changing, and if we don't change with it, Mitchell Investment Group won't exist in 10 years. My father set down his wine glass with a sound that silenced the table. "Alexandra, that's enough. You're being hysterical and dramatic. Mitchell Investment Group has weathered recessions, market crashes, and every trend that's come along. We don't need some unproven technology that you've been tinkering with in your spare time. What we need is for you to understand your place in this family." "My place?" The words came out quieter than I intended. "Yes, your place. Marcus is being groomed to take over the company. Diana has her own path. And you, Alexandra, you need to decide whether you're going to be part of this family's legacy or whether you're going to keep chasing these fantasies that are beneath your breeding." I looked around the table, searching for an ally. My mother avoided my eyes. Marcus smirked. Diana had returned to her phone. The walls of that beautiful restaurant suddenly felt like they were closing in, the gaslight flickering like the dying hopes I'd carried into that room. "So, let me understand this clearly," I said, my voice steady, despite the fury building in my chest. "You're not even going to look at what I've created. You're not going to consider it." "There's nothing to consider," my father said. "You're my daughter, not my business partner. If you want to be part of this family, you'll stop this nonsense and start acting like a Mitchell. That means supporting your brother, maintaining appropriate social connections, and eventually making a good marriage. That's what we need from you." The waiter arrived with our appetizers, placing a plate of oysters in front of me. I stared at them, these expensive delicacies, and suddenly they represented everything I despised about this family. The waste, the pretension, the refusal to adapt or change or even consider that maybe, just maybe, someone outside the established hierarchy might have something valuable to offer. I see, I said quietly. I closed my portfolio, the pages of my future clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. Thank you for clarifying that. We finished the meal in tense silence. My father talked business with Marcus, discussing clients and portfolios with the easy familiarity that should have included me but never did. My mother talked about some charity gala with Diana, planning what dress she should wear and who would be there. And I sat there, invisible, my portfolio growing heavier with each passing minute. After that dinner, I tried one more time. I requested a formal meeting with my father and the board of directors. I prepared an even more comprehensive presentation, bringing in supporting data from MIT's research on AI and financial services, case studies from successful fintech companies, and a detailed implementation plan that addressed every possible concern. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. My father listened with barely concealed impatience, while Marcus openly checked his phone. When I finished, the head of the board, a man named Gerald, who'd been my father's fraternity brother, actually laughed. William, your daughter certainly has enthusiasm. Perhaps she should channel it into something more traditional. Have you considered that she might be acting out because she needs to settle down? A good marriage might focus her energies appropriately. That was the moment I realized that nothing I did would ever matter to them. I could cure cancer with an algorithm and they'd still see me as an over-emotional girl who needed to be managed and married off. My achievements weren't impressive. They were embarrassing, a sign that I didn't know my place. I went home that night to my small apartment, the one I'd been renting instead of living in the family mansion, because I'd wanted to prove I could make it on my own. I sat on my secondhand couch with my laptop open, looking at my AI platform, at years of work that my own family had dismissed in minutes. And I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to waste my talent trying to fit into their outdated vision of what I should be. I was going to build my own empire, one so successful that they'd have no choice but to see what I was capable of. And if they still couldn't see it, then I'd make sure everyone else in the world did. The next day, I incorporated AM Holdings. The initials stood for Alexandra Mitchell, but I didn't use my full name. I wanted to build something on merit, not family connections. I liquidated everything I had sold, my car, emptied my savings, and moved into a studio apartment the size of a closet. I lived on ramen and worked 20-hour days refining my platform, cold calling potential investors, attending every tech meetup and venture capital event I could find. The first year was brutal. My family thought I was having a breakdown. My mother called weekly, begging me to come home and stop embarrassing them. My father didn't call at all, which somehow hurt more. Marcus sent me a check once with a note that said, "For when you're ready to give up this nonsense." I burned it. Diana was the only one who visited my studio apartment, and when she saw how I was living, sleeping on an air mattress and eating cereal for dinner, she cried, "Alex, please come home. You don't have to do this. Just apologize to Dad and he'll take you back." Take me back as what, Diana? As the disappointing daughter who needs to be fixed? No, I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on his. But what if you do fail? I looked at my laptop at the lines of code that represented my dreams. Then at least I'll know I tried. That's more than any of you can say. She left crying, and that was the last time any of them reached out for 3 years. Those 3 years were a masterclass in resilient strategy and sheer stubborn determination. I found my first investor at a tech conference in Austin, a venture capitalist named Sarah Chen, who'd built her own fortune after being told she was too young, too female, and too Asian to succeed in Silicon Valley. She saw something in me that my family never had: belief in the technology and the hunger to prove everyone wrong. With Sarah's initial investment, I was able to hire a small team of developers and analysts. We worked out of a cramped co-working space, surviving on pizza and ambition. But my platform worked. It worked beautifully. Within 6 months, we generated returns that exceeded traditional investment methods by 35%. Within a year, we had our first major client, a small pension fund that was willing to take a chance on an unproven firm run by an unknown woman. I learned everything I'd never been taught at Mitchell Investment Group because I'd been excluded from the real decisions. I learned how to negotiate with hardball venture capitalists, how to manage a team under pressure, how to stay calm when everything seemed to be falling apart. I learned how to read people, how to identify the difference between those who doubted me because of legitimate concerns and those who doubted me because of who I was. And I learned how to turn both into motivation. The breakthrough came during my second year. A major tech company was looking for a new asset management firm after their previous one had spectacularly failed to predict a market downturn. They were desperate for innovation and willing to consider unconventional approaches. I pitched them competing against firms that had been established for 50 years, against companies with recognizable names and enormous resources. I walked in with my laptop, my data, and nothing to lose. I got the account. And once word spread that AM Holdings had landed that client, the floodgates opened. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about this mysterious firm with unprecedented returns. Tech journalists started calling. Industry publications wanted interviews. Other clients came looking for the same results. I scaled up carefully, strategically. I didn't grow too fast or take on more than we could handle. I built relationships with the right people, invested in the best talent, and continuously refined my algorithms. I learned from every mistake, adapted to every challenge, and never ever compromised on my vision. By year 3, AM Holdings had assets under management in the hundreds of millions. I'd moved out of that studio apartment into a real place with actual furniture. I'd assembled a team of brilliant minds who believed in what we were building, and I'd caught the attention of some of the biggest names in finance and technology. One of those names was Richard Kingston Sr., the patriarch of Kingston Enterprises, one of the most respected investment firms on the West Coast. He'd been watching AM Holdings, and he'd done something my own father had never bothered to do. He'd actually looked at my work. He reached out through his assistant requesting a meeting. I met him at his office, a glass tower overlooking San Francisco Bay. He was 72 years old with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for being both brilliant and brutal. He could have intimidated me, but after 3 years of fighting for every inch of success, I'd learned not to be intimidated by anyone. "Miss Mitchell," he said, though he didn't know my connection to William Mitchell at that point. I'd never used my full name in business, going by Alexandra Mason instead. "I've been in this business for 50 years, and I've never seen anything like what you've built. Your platform's predictive accuracy is remarkable. The question is, how are you doing it?" I spent 2 hours walking him through my methodology, my algorithms, my approach to risk management and opportunity identification. He asked sharp questions, probing for weaknesses, testing my knowledge. By the end, he was leaning back in his chair with a look I'd never seen from someone in his generation when looking at someone like me. "Respect. You remind me of myself when I was starting out," he said. "Hungry, brilliant, and unwilling to accept the limitations everyone else imposes. I built Kingston Enterprises because I saw opportunities that my superiors couldn't or wouldn't see. I've been looking for someone to carry that forward, someone who understands that this industry needs to evolve or die. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Kingston?" I asked carefully. He laughed to sound like gravel in a tin can. "A job? No, Miss Mason. I'm offering you a partnership. Kingston Enterprises needs what you've built, and you need the legitimacy and resources that my name can provide. We could build something extraordinary together." It was tempting. So tempting. But I'd learned the hard way about partnerships with established powers. "With respect, Mr. Kingston, I've spent 3 years building AM Holdings specifically so I wouldn't have to answer to anyone else's vision. I appreciate the offer, but I need to maintain my independence." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand, and I respect that. But let me ask you something, Miss Mason. What's your long-term plan? You're successful now, but this industry is filled with people who peaked early and then got crushed by the bigger players. How are you going to compete when the established firms really start to see you as a threat?" It was the question I'd been wrestling with privately. AM Holdings was successful, but we were still small enough to be vulnerable. If the major investment firms decided to copy my approach or use their resources to undercut me, I could be in trouble. I needed something bigger, something that would give me real power in this industry. "I grow strategically," I said. "I build alliances with people who share my vision. And I make sure I'm always 3 steps ahead of the competition." Kingston smiled, the expression almost paternal. "You know what? I'm going to make you a different offer. I'm 72 years old, Miss Mason. I have maybe 5 good years left in me before I need to step back. My children aren't interested in the business. They're more focused on spending the money I've made than maintaining it. What if instead of a partnership, I offered you the opportunity to acquire Kingston Enterprises?" I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. You're talking about a sale. I'm talking about a transition, structured over time with me maintaining an advisory role while you integrate my firm's resources with your technology. It would make you one of the most powerful players in this industry overnight. And it would give me the peace of mind of knowing that what I built will continue under someone who understands where this industry is heading. Mr. Kingston, with all due respect, acquiring your firm would require capital I don't currently have access to. Not if we structure it correctly. Private equity leveraged buyouts earn out provisions. There are ways to make this work if you're interested. The question is, are you ready to play at that level? I thought about my father sitting in his office at Mitchell Investment Group, convinced that his old-school methods would last forever. I thought about Marcus preparing to inherit a dying company. I thought about my family dismissing my dreams while I sat in that studio apartment eating ramen. And I thought about what it would mean to not just succeed, but to succeed so spectacularly that they couldn't ignore it, couldn't explain it away, couldn't pretend it didn't matter. Let's talk specifics, I said. The next 18 months were a whirlwind of negotiations, due diligence, and strategic planning. I brought in Sarah Chen and built a consortium of investors who believed in the vision. We structured the deal brilliantly using a combination of debt financing, equity partnerships, and performance-based buyouts. Kingston Enterprises would become a subsidiary of AM Holdings with Richard Kingston Sr., maintaining a board position and advisory role while I took operational control. But I didn't announce it. I didn't make it public. I kept it quiet, building my power base in silence, while my family continued with their lives completely unaware that the youngest daughter they'd dismissed was now controlling assets worth billions. During those 18 months, I monitored Mitchell Investment Group from a distance. They were struggling exactly as I'd predicted. The market was moving toward automated trading and AI-driven analytics, and firms that couldn't adapt were bleeding clients. My father was trying to maintain relevance through sheer force of will and old connections, but it wasn't working. Their returns were down, their client base was shrinking, and industry insiders were starting to whisper that Mitchell Investment Group was a dinosaur waiting for extinction. Marcus had taken on more responsibility, but he lacked the vision or skill to turn things around. He was trying to copy some of the new tech-driven approaches without understanding them, resulting in expensive failures that only accelerated the decline. Diana had gotten married to some investment banker and was living off her trust fund, posting Instagram photos from exotic vacations, while the family business crumbled. My mother was focused on charity galas and social standing, seemingly oblivious to the financial reality. And my father was growing more desperate, more rigid, more determined to prove that his old methods could still work if everyone would just trust him. I watched it all unfold with a mixture of vindication and sadness. I'd tried to warn them. I'd offered them the solution. And they'd rejected it because it came from me. Then came the night that changed everything. I received a notification from one of my monitoring systems. Mitchell Investment Group was hosting a major dinner at Le Blanc, the same restaurant where they'd dismissed my dreams 5 years earlier. They were meeting with Kingston Enterprises to discuss a potential partnership or acquisition. My father, in his desperation, was trying to sell to the very firm I now controlled. The irony was too perfect to resist. Richard Kingston called me immediately. "Alexandra, your family doesn't know who you are, do they?" I'd finally told him my real name months earlier during one of our strategy sessions. He'd been fascinated by the story, by the fact that the woman revolutionizing his industry had been rejected by her own family's firm. No, they don't. They think I'm still struggling in some startup that never went anywhere. They stopped asking years ago. This dinner tonight, they're desperate. Your father wants Kingston Enterprises to either partner with them or acquire them outright. He's offering very favorable terms because he knows Mitchell Investment Group won't survive another year without help. "What do you want to do, Richard?" He chuckled. "This is your decision, Alexandra. You control Kingston Enterprises now. I'm just the old man enjoying the show. But if you want my advice, I think it's time your family learned who you've become." I sat in my office, the penthouse suite that overlooked the city, and I made my decision. I wasn't going to let them sell to Kingston Enterprises under false pretenses. I wasn't going to let them continue to live in their delusion. It was time for the reckoning. I had Arya, my AI assistant, prepare all the documentation. I had my legal team review every detail. And I chose what I would wear with the same care I'd use, choosing weapons for battle, a power suit in midnight blue heels that added 3 inches to my height, and the confidence that came from knowing I held all the cards. When I arrived at Blanc that evening, I initially approached as if I were just another family member showing up uninvited. I wanted to see if anything had changed, if maybe 5 years had softened their attitudes or made them reconsider. I walked in with some vague hope that perhaps this could be a reconciliation. Instead, I got Diana. She was standing near the host stand, checking her phone when she saw me. Her face contorted with shock and then disgust. "What are you doing here?" "This dinner is for important people, not for failures who've been wandering around playing entrepreneur." She waved her hand at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered in from the street. Any lingering hope I'd carried died right there. I'd given them 5 years to change, 5 years to maybe wonder if they'd been wrong, 5 years to reach out. And the first words out of my sister's mouth were an insult. Marcus appeared behind her, his face flushing with anger. "Seriously, Alex, you're going to crash a business dinner. Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" He actually pushed my chair as I tried to approach the table, a physical dismissal that made several nearby diners turn to stare. But the real blow came from my father. When I finally made it to the table's edge, William Mitchell looked at me with an expression of pure contempt. He actually raised his hand, signaling to the restaurant's security, preparing to have his own daughter removed. "Alexandra, this isn't the place for your theatrics. We're meeting with serious investors. You've already abandoned this family. Don't humiliate us further." His words, the venom in his voice, the fact that he'd rather have security escort me out than acknowledge my presence, it crystallized everything. This wasn't a family. This was a hierarchy that I'd never been allowed to be part of, and no amount of achievement on my own would ever change how they saw me. So I left. I walked out of that restaurant past the pitying looks of the staff, past the uncomfortable glances of the other diners. I got into my car where my driver was waiting, and I sat there for one long minute staring at the restaurant's golden lights spilling onto the sidewalk. And then I smiled, because they had no idea what was about to happen. I called Arya. "Prepare the helicopter. Full board meeting in 30 minutes. And send the final acquisition papers to Richard. Tonight we make it official. Tonight we change everything." 15 minutes later, I was back at Blanc. But this time I didn't sneak in through the front entrance hoping for crumbs of acknowledgement. I walked in like I owned the place because metaphorically I could have. My security team flanked me, my assistant was on the phone finalizing details, and I'd changed into an even more powerful outfit, one that screamed success and authority. That's when I reached the moment you saw at the beginning of this story. The frozen faces, the shock, the recognition from Richard Kingston that yes, this was really happening. The acquisition papers being signed while my family watched in horror. The champagne toast to their reckoning. But that was just the beginning of the real transformation. The morning after that dinner, I arrived at my office before dawn. I knew Marcus and Diana would come. They'd be angry, confused, desperate to understand what had happened and how to fix it. I was ready for them. They burst into my penthouse office at Mitchell Innovation Center, the building I'd renamed after finalizing the Kingston acquisition without even knocking. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept, his tie askew, his hair uncombed. Diana's carefully maintained composure had cracked her makeup, smudged like she'd been crying. "What have you done?" Marcus shouted, throwing a newspaper onto my desk. The headline read, "Tech Mogul's Shocking Acquisition, Kingston Enterprises Falls to Mysterious AM Holdings." Beneath it was a smaller headline, "Mitchell Investment Group on the brink as family drama unfolds." "I did what I told Father I would do 5 years ago," I said calmly, not rising from my chair. "I revolutionized the investment industry. You just weren't paying attention." Diana's voice was shrill with panic. "You've destroyed us. Clients are leaving. The board is in chaos. Dad had a breakdown last night. How can you do this to your own family?" "Sit down," I said, my voice cutting through their hysteria. "Both of you. Now." The authority in my tone surprised them enough that they actually obeyed. I had Arya project holographic displays of Mitchell Investment Group's financial data onto the glass walls of my office. Numbers don't lie, and these numbers told a story of slow death. "This is your family legacy," I said, gesturing to the declining graphs. 20% loss in clients over 3 years. Returns that barely match inflation. Operating costs that exceed revenue. You're not losing because of me. You've been losing for years because you refuse to adapt. Marcus tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "I offered you the solution 5 years ago. I begged Father to listen. And you all treated me like I was stupid, like my ideas were worthless, like I was an embarrassment for trying to innovate. So I went out and built an empire while you clung to methods that stopped working in 2010. I switched the display to show AM Holdings' growth trajectory. The contrast was stunning: a rocket ship versus a sinking ship. While you were dismissing me, I was securing patents, building relationships, attracting the best minds in the industry. While you were laughing at my fantasies, I was managing billions in assets and generating returns that your firm couldn't dream of achieving. Diana was crying again, but this time it wasn't anger. It was recognition. We were wrong about you. Yes, I said simply. You were. But the question now isn't about who was right or wrong 5 years ago. The question is, what happens next? That's when my father arrived. William Mitchell looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His perfect posture was gone, replaced by a slump that made him seem smaller. His always immaculate suit was rumpled. His eyes were red-rimmed, and in his hands he carried something that made my breath catch. It was a leather folder, worn and old. I recognized it immediately. It was the portfolio I'd presented at that dinner 5 years ago. I kept it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. After you left after the board meeting, I kept it. I would take it out sometimes and look at your projections, your ideas, your vision, and every time I told myself you were wrong, that you didn't understand the industry like I did. He walked slowly to my desk and placed the folder in front of me. But you weren't wrong, Alexandra. You were right about everything. The market shifts the technological innovations the client demands. Every warning you gave came true. And I was too proud, too afraid, too set in my ways to listen. This was the apology I'd dreamed about for 5 years. But now that it was here, it felt hollow. Father, do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep in that studio apartment, wondering if I was crazy for believing in myself when my own family thought I was a failure? Do you know what it cost me to rebuild my confidence after you shattered it? I know I can never make up for that, he said, and for the first time in my life I saw him cry. I know I destroyed something precious. My daughter came to me with brilliance, and I threw it back in her face because it didn't fit my understanding of the world. Because you weren't Marcus. Because you were supposed to be something else. I failed you, Alexandra. As a father and as a businessman, I failed you. Marcus was staring at our father like he'd never seen him before. Diana had gone completely silent. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't that you rejected my ideas. It was that you rejected me. You made me feel like wanting to contribute, wanting to build something, wanting to use the mind God gave me made me somehow defective as a daughter. I know, my father said. And I have no excuse. I let tradition, ego, and fear blind me to what was right in front of me. You're the most talented person in this family, and I punished you for it. I turned to face them all. Mitchell Investment Group is dying. You know it, I know it, and the entire industry knows it. You came to that dinner last night hoping to sell to Kingston Enterprises because it was your last option. Well, you got your wish. Kingston Enterprises is buying Mitchell Investment Group, but Kingston Enterprises belongs to me now. The implications settled over them like a physical weight. So what are you going to do? Marcus asked quietly. Are you going to shut us down? Fire everyone. This is your revenge. I let the question hang for a moment, letting them really feel the uncertainty, the powerlessness of having someone else control their fate. This was what they'd made me feel for 23 years. I said, honestly. I have every right to. You treated me like garbage, dismissed my worth, and tried to humiliate me. I could return that tenfold and be completely justified. I pulled up another display, this one showing a reorganization plan I'd been developing since the acquisition was finalized. But I'm not going to do that. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. Mitchell Investment Group is going to become a division of AM Holdings. It's going to be modernized, restructured, and dragged into the 21st century. But there won't be any more inherited positions. No more assuming someone belongs at the top because of their last name. I looked at Marcus. You want to stay. You start at the bottom. You learn AI-driven analytics. You study algorithmic trading. You prove that you understand this industry not because you're a Mitchell, but because you're competent. I turned to Diana. You want a role. Then develop actual skills. Learn blockchain technology. Study client relationship management in the digital age. Show me that you can contribute something other than your last name. Finally, I looked at my father. And you? You can stay on as an advisor if you can let go of the ego and actually advise instead of command. Share your experience with negotiation, with client relationships, with the human elements of this business. But the era of William Mitchell as unquestioned leader is over. And if we can't do that, Marcus asked, his voice small, Then you leave, I said simply. You take your trust funds, you find something else to do with your lives, and Mitchell Investment Group continues without you. The company will survive either way. The question is whether you will be part of its future. The silence in that room was profound. I'd given them a choice that was both generous and brutal: accept your inadequacy and work to overcome it, or leave. Diana was the first to speak, her voice trembling. I want to learn. Alex, I want you to teach me about blockchain and AI. I've wasted so much time being what everyone expected me to be. I want to actually be something. Marcus took longer, his pride visibly warring with reality. Finally, he nodded. I'll start at the bottom, and I'll prove myself. Not as the heir, but as someone who deserves to be here. My father walked over to me, and for the first time in my memory, he looked at me not as a disappointing daughter, but as an equal. Teach us, Alexandra. Teach us how to be worthy of the legacy you're building. Over the next 6 months, I did exactly that. I integrated Mitchell Investment Group into AM Holdings' structure, implementing my AI systems and training everyone from the top down on new methodologies. It wasn't easy. There were growing pains, resistance from old guard employees who didn't want to adapt, and moments when I questioned whether I was being too harsh or not harsh enough. Marcus struggled at first, his ego constantly getting in the way. I put him through the same training program I gave to new analysts, and watching him fumble through tasks that should have been basic was both satisfying and sad. But slowly, something changed. Away from the pressure of being the heir, away from our father's expectations, Marcus discovered that he actually enjoyed the analytical work. He was good at pattern recognition, at seeing connections between disparate data points. Not as good as my AI systems, but good enough to add value. He became a solid team member, no longer coasting on his name, but earning his place. Diana surprised me the most. She threw herself into learning with an enthusiasm I'd never seen from her. She was actually hungry for knowledge, for purpose, for something more than being a pretty face on social media. She took to client relationship management beautifully, using her social skills and genuine personality to build connections with our new demographic of tech-savvy investors. She created a whole division focused on bringing investment opportunities to younger clients, people who'd never considered Mitchell Investment Group before but were intrigued by AM Holdings' innovative approach. My father kept his word. He stepped back from operational control, but provided valuable insights on relationship management, negotiation tactics, and the human psychology of high-stakes investing. Stripped of his authority, he became what he should have been all along: a mentor, sharing hard-won wisdom rather than a tyrant demanding obedience. We developed a relationship I'd never thought possible, one built on mutual respect rather than obligation. My mother struggled the most. She'd built her entire identity around being Mrs. William Mitchell, the queen of society circles, and suddenly that currency didn't mean as much. But eventually she found her place too, using her connections to host events that brought together old money and new tech, creating networking opportunities that generated business. She even apologized to me one day in her own way, saying, I should have encouraged your mind instead of trying to fit you into a box. You were always too big for any box we tried to put you in. The transformation wasn't just about my family, though. It was about me, too. I'd spent 5 years driven by anger, by the need to prove them wrong, by the desire for validation I'd been denied. But as I watched them struggle and grow, as I saw genuine change happening, something shifted inside me. The rage that had fueled my rise began to transform into something else: pride, not in their suffering, but in their willingness to change. One evening, about 8 months after that fateful dinner at LeBlanc, I received a text from my father: family dinner tonight. Your choice of restaurant. And this time, everyone has a seat at the table. I chose LeBlanc again because some circles need to be closed. When I arrived, they were all there waiting: my father, my mother, Marcus, Diana. But this time when I walked in, they all stood. My father pulled out the chair at the head of the table. This is your seat now, he said. You've earned it. We sat down as a family for the first time in 5 years, but it was different. The hierarchy had been dismantled and rebuilt on merit rather than birth order. The conversation flowed naturally, covering business strategy, personal growth, and even jokes about our past mistakes. Diana talked enthusiastically about her new client division. Marcus shared insights from his analysis work. My mother described an upcoming event that would introduce AM Holdings to several major philanthropic organizations. And my father listened more than he spoke, occasionally offering advice but no longer dominating the conversation. At the end of the meal, my father raised his glass. To Alexandra, who saved this family by refusing to let us destroy her. You showed us that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of who people expect you to be and becoming who you're meant to be. We're better because you were brave enough to walk away and strong enough to come back. We clinked glasses and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like I was actually part of my family, not as a subordinate or a rebel, but as an equal. Today, AM Holdings is one of the most successful investment firms in the country, with Mitchell Investment Group thriving as a division that bridges traditional investment wisdom with cutting-edge technology. Marcus is now head of our predictive analytics team, having genuinely earned the position through 3 years of solid work and continuous learning. Diana runs our entire client experience division, creating innovative ways to make investment management accessible to a new generation. My father serves on our board of advisors, and his insights on negotiation have helped close several major deals. My mother's networking events have become legendary in the industry, attracting clients we'd never have reached through traditional means. But more than the business success, we're actually a family now. A real one built on respect and genuine relationships, rather than obligation and tradition. We have dinner together regularly, and the conversations are real. We challenge each other, support each other, and celebrate each other's victories. Sometimes I think about that version of Alexandra who walked into LeBlanc 5 years ago with a portfolio full of dreams and a heart full of hope. That girl who wanted so desperately to be seen, to be valued, to matter to the people who were supposed to love her. I wish I could tell her that it gets better, that the pain she's about to experience will forge her into something stronger than she could imagine. But I also know that she needed to go through every bit of that journey, every rejection, every night crying in that studio apartment, every moment of doubt, to become the person who could stand in that doorway and own her victory. The greatest revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's becoming so successful that they have to acknowledge it and then being generous enough to bring them along when you succeed. It's transforming pain into power, rejection into resilience, and anger into achievement. It's proving that the person they dismissed was actually the most valuable person in the room all along. Sometimes people ask me if I regret those 5 years of struggle, if I wish my family had just listened to me from the start and saved everyone the pain. The answer is no. Because those 5 years taught me things I could never have learned if success had come easily. They taught me that my value doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. They taught me that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. And they taught me that the best version of yourself is the one you become when you stop trying to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be. If you're out there right now feeling dismissed, undervalued, or invisible to the people who should see you, I want you to know something. Their blindness is not your limitation. Their inability to see your worth is not evidence that you lack it. Sometimes the people closest to us are the least equipped to recognize our potential, blinded by their own expectations and fears. Build anyway. Dream anyway. Become who you're meant to be anyway. And when you succeed, when you stand in your own doorway holding all the power they thought you'd never have, you'll have a choice. You can destroy them or you can transform them. You can become what hurt you or you can become something better. I chose transformation. I chose to turn my family's rejection into my fuel, their dismissal into my determination, and ultimately their failure into our collective future. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when revenge seemed sweeter than reconciliation. But building something beautiful out of something broken, that's the real victory. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most? Have you ever had to choose between bitterness and growth? And what did you build from the ashes of rejection? Drop your story in the comments below. Share this video if you've ever had to prove someone wrong. And subscribe to this channel because this is just the beginning of the conversations we're going to have about turning pain into power and rejection into revolution. Remember, the best revenge is living so well that they can't ignore it, and then being big enough to bring them into the light you created. Your move.